By the spring of 1934, the roads of rural America seemed to tremble beneath the weight of two young fugitives, who had become larger than life. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow were no longer merely criminals. They had evolved into symbols of rebellion, desperation, and doomed romance in a world still reeling from the Great Depression. But behind the headlines and sensational photographs lived two exhausted souls, pushing forward on borrowed time, clinging to each other while the country slowly turned against them. The world that once cheered their defiance was healing. Banks were reopening, hope was spreading, and America no longer wished to glorify outlaws. It wanted safety, stability, closure. It wanted Bonnie and Clyde to fall, yet they kept moving, streaking across the backroads in Clyde's beloved Ford V8, chasing the illusion of freedom. Their gang had shrunk until only the two of them remained to silhouettes framed by dust, speed, and fate. Clyde believed he could outrun the world with enough horsepower and cunning. Bonnie believed she could outlove it, but somewhere deep inside them both, a quiet dread whispered that the end was drawing near. They slept fitfully in barns, abandoned cabins, fields, and makeshift hideouts. Bonnie wrote poems about death. Clyde cleaned his guns obsessively. They laughed sometimes, but the laughter felt brittle. Something was closing in. That something was Frank Hammer, a relentless former Texas Ranger who had studied their habits with the patience of a seasoned predator. He learned their roots, their loyalties, their weaknesses, their rhythms. He saw what the lovers themselves could not admit. They were predictable now. Predictability kills outlaws. Hammer quietly assembled a six-man posse willing to wait as long as it took, hidden in the brush with rifles and a singular purpose to end the Barrow fugitives forever. Clyde's loyalty to friends would be the key. Henry Methvin, their young accomplice, had a father who feared for his son's life and struck a deal with the law. The elder Methvin agreed to help lure Bonnie and Clyde into a trap, in exchange for leniency for his boy. A lonely road in Beanville Parish, Louisiana, was chosen. A truck would be staged with a wheel removed to look like it had broken down. Clyde never left a friend stranded, and Bonnie never left Clyde. In the days before the ambush, Bonnie was restless. She dreamed of shadows and endings. She didn't speak of it directly, but Clyde noticed the tremors in her hands, the distant look in her eyes. One night, as they sat together in a quiet cabin, Clyde softly admitted, "I don't think we'll grow old." Bonnie kissed him fiercely, whispering, "Then we die together." They meant it, and fate listened. The morning of May 23rd arrived with an eerie stillness. The posse hid beside the road before dawn, rifles ready, nerves taut. Ivy Methvin's truck sat exactly where it needed to be, tilted with one wheel removed. The air felt thick, as though even nature anticipated what was coming. Hours crawled by. Then, faintly at first, the familiar hum of Clyde's Ford approached. Bonnie adjusted her hat. Clyde squinted at the road, and then they saw it, the truck. Clyde slowed. Bonnie sensed something wrong in the air, some unnatural silence. She whispered his name, fear flickering in her voice. But it was too late. Before Clyde could fully stop, thunder erupted from the brush. 6 rifles unleashed a relentless torrent of bullets, not as warning but as execution. Clyde died instantly, the life leaving him before his body had time to slump. Bonnie screamed a sound witnesses would never forget and reached for him. Just as another wave of gunfire tore through the car, glass exploded, metal shrieked, dust churned. For nearly a full minute the air was filled with violent thunder until both bodies were shredded. Still and silent. When the final echo faded, Bonnie lay draped over Clyde, her hand inches from his chest. Their story had ended exactly where it began, with one reaching for the other. As the smoke settled, the lawmen approached, shaken not by regret, but by the weight of finality. The outlaws who had dominated headlines for 2 years were now lifeless bodies, in a bullet-riddled car. The stillness was shattered minutes later by the arrival of locals drawn by the sound. Curiosity, horror, fascination. People crowded the scene so fast that the posse struggled to hold them back. Some wanted to see the infamous lovers, others wanted proof they were truly dead. A few tried to touch the bodies, to take souvenirs, strands of hair, fragments of clothing, anything that linked them to the legend. The deputies shouted, threatened, even pushed, but the crowd surged like a living tide. When undertakers arrived, the bodies were removed awkwardly and placed on a flatbed truck. It was a crude ending for a pair the newspapers had sculpted into myth. But death cares little for legend. Blood stained the roadside, and the Ford riddled with holes, would eventually become a morbid traveling exhibit. The news reached the nation within hours, exploding across front pages. Some celebrated the fall of dangerous criminals. Others mourned the end of an outlaw romance that had captured the public imagination. Photographs of Bonnie and Clyde's shattered bodies erased the glamour for some, and heightened it for others. Their funerals attracted thousands. Bonnie and Clyde had wanted to be buried together, but Bonnie's mother refused, insisting her daughter would not spend eternity beside a Barrow. Crowds in Dallas overwhelmed the streets, climbing trees and fences for a glimpse of the coffins. Clyde's mother wept uncontrollably. Bonnie's mother stood stone-faced. The poem Bonnie had written, The Trail's End, whispered through the crowd like prophecy. Even in death, they were inseparable in memory, though separated in burial. Frank Hammer gave few interviews. He insisted he felt no hatred, only duty. Yet in private moments he could never fully silence the image of Bonnie's last expression. Clyde's faint smile before slowing the car, the innocence of that final approach. He had done what the nation demanded. But legends die differently than men, and the burden was heavier than the headlines suggested. The Ford became a relic. Over the years it would be displayed in carnivals, casinos, museums, its bullet holes touched by millions of fingers. People traveled to the ambush site too, standing in the stillness of the Louisiana road where two young outlaws met their end. Some claimed the place felt haunted not by ghosts, but by memory itself. As time passed, Hollywood romanticized their tale, turning them into tragic lovers, symbols of rebellion, martyrs of a cruel era. Musicians wrote songs, writers crafted ballads. All of it blurred truth into myth. Yet beneath all interpretations remains the simplest reality. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow were not heroes nor monsters, but two flawed young people shaped by hardship, desperation, and a love intense enough to carry them until their final breath. They believed they could outrun fate. They believed their love was a shield. But every road ends somewhere, and theirs ended on a quiet Louisiana morning, with Bonnie reaching for Clyde and Clyde slowing the car for what he thought was a friend. They died together, exactly as Bonnie had written they would, bound not by crime but by a devotion that time would immortalize. And that is why their story endures, not because of gunfire, or robberies, or photographs, but because it is the story of two human beings chasing freedom, passion, and each other, until life itself could no longer keep up with them.